With Liquor Barn, you can shop your favorite bourbon, that perfect bottle of wine, or discover something new. To place an order for pickup or delivery, download the Liquor Barn app, visit liquorbarn.com, or call your nearest Liquor Barn location. Follow us on social media and subscribe to our email list for all the latest news on products, promotions, and events. Liquor Barn, where Kentuckians go to celebrate life. Cheers!
Welcome to the Bourbon Life Podcast, your source for all things bourbon. Join your hosts, Mark and Matt, as they drink and review bourbons, share news about upcoming events, interview the who's who in the bourbon world, and, most importantly, bring you along for the fun of living the bourbon life. Now, here's your hosts, Mark and Matt.
All right, everybody, welcome back for another episode of the Bourbon Life Podcast. I'm your host, Mark, and with me, well, not tonight, my normal co-host, Matt, is not here with me, but I do have Stacey. Stacey, how you doing tonight?
Well, you said I do have Stacey, but that didn't sound like you were that excited, so that's okay. It's fine. I'm not Matt, everybody, but Stacey. It's just Stacey.
Super excited to have you with me here, Stacey.
I'm really excited to be here, Mark.
Yeah.
She is better looking. I'm just saying.
Hey, I appreciate that.
We're actually podcasting. We are in front of a live studio audience. You probably have heard some heckling. No, I'm just kidding. But we are here. We're at BourbonCon here at the Marriott Griffin Gate. This is the first year they've done this event. So we are super excited to be here with them. We are an official partner of BourbonCon. And for the first year, Stacey, we were just talking about that before we started the show. I think they've done an excellent job out here. First year, we've had a great time. We've killed some wonderful drinks at the VIP lounge.
VIP is where it's at. So if you guys are looking to spend some money next year, it's worth it.
There you go. That's right. Yeah,
it's worth it.
Next year, you definitely need to hit the VIP.
I am a little salty though that I missed out on the King of Kentucky
yesterday. Yeah, no kidding. But this is
nice.
I know.
It's been a great weekend. We've had a really good time, and look forward to working with BourbonCon as they continue to grow and expand this event. And it's the middle of January, and there's nothing else bourbon related really going on. There's not, there's no festivals.
I don't know about you, but I drink a lot of bourbon when I'm watching Kentucky basketball.
Well, yeah, this year you have to. I mean, that's but they've been turning it around, getting a little better, right?
Can.
So, well, with that said, let's jump into it because we're on kind of a tight schedule today for this show. But we appreciate all of our sponsors, and of course, we appreciate our live audience here tonight as well.
All right, there we go.
We appreciate all of our listeners as well, everything that you all do for us. With that said, Stacey, you want to tell everybody who we have with us?
We have Wally Dant here with us this evening, guys.
Yeah,
pleasure to be here.
Yeah, he's the president and distiller. Yep. Yeah, with Log Still Distillery, and that is in Gethsemane, Kentucky.
Gethsemane, Kentucky. That's right.
That's a mouthful.
Cool. Well, Wally, thank you for joining us. We, I usually like to tell people if I've met our guests before, how that happened, but I met you at the Kentucky Bourbon Festival briefly. You may not even remember, but I got the opportunity to speak with you just really quick, and we talked about having you on the show. And it's taken a few months to make that happen.
Right.
But we're really excited that you're able to join us, especially here at the BourbonCon event. So this is going to be a lot of fun. And we got 3 things poured up, so we'll work our way through that tonight. But would you want to tell everybody what we have poured up on this first round?
The first up is our barrel finished gin. So 6 months rested in that barrel finished gin. It's actually a wheated bourbon barrel of ours that we use. And we actually made the botanical mix in this gin to kind of match, or what I thought would match, right, in that wheated bourbon barrel. And so that botanical mix includes cranberry and some coriander, some cinnamon. But what happens over that 6-month time frame is that juniper that everybody well knows is in a gin, while you can smell it on the nose, certainly, right? You can smell that gin on the nose, that juniper on the nose. What happens in that 6-month time frame in that bourbon barrel is that from a palate perspective, when you taste it, it'll kind of drop off pretty quickly, because what that barrel does is kind of what I call soften the edge of the juniper, that either folks out there love gin or they say, I had a bad experience at my father's or grandfather's gin and never want to have it again, right? And so I see some of you guys raising your hands. My dad drank, Gilby's or Beefeaters, one of the two. That's what he always had in the bar. I tried it a few different times, maybe, didn't tell him about it, and it punished me. And so over the course of time, my palate's developed, and so from a distiller's perspective, you can have a lot of fun with gin, right? As opposed to vodka, how many times you're going to distill a vodka to distill a vodka to distill a vodka, and you still get vodka, right? And so with gin, you can actually play around with that botanical mix. And so, we've got a dry gin out there that we think is pretty nice. But this one is different from our dry gin in that we use coriander, cranberry, because I thought it would match better with the wheated bourbon barrel. So if you guys taste it up.
Yeah, definitely. And this is 93 proof. Right? 93
proof, yeah. Okay. So we wanted to stand up to a cocktail.
Yeah, very nice. Stacey, what are you picking up in terms of the nose and palate?
Well, the nose, just Wally hit that on the nose. No pun intended. But the juniper does come across way more on the nose than it does on the palate. The palate is really nice and sweet. And
yeah, I think that's the thing that stood out when you said that on the palate or on the nose, of course, you get that juniper, which you'd expect from a gin. Mm-hmm. It's just got a nice balanced floral flavor, like a lemongrass as well, kind of a citrusy aroma.
Is very refreshing. I like this a lot.
Yeah, but on the palate, it's that juniper really does dissipate pretty quickly, and you don't pick it up like you do on the nose. So yeah, very nice.
Yeah, we're glad you made a full recovery from gin.
Oh, there you go. There you go. It was one of those things that for our tasting room, what we do at Log Still, we actually use this barrel finished gin and replace bourbon like in a traditional old fashioned with this gin, and it's just a nice twist on an old cocktail. And it's it's a great way to express to your patrons out there that are coming to see you or your visitors that hey, we're doing something a little bit different, and and this is a great introduction to the gin category for a lot of folks that just haven't tried gin in a while, don't like it, and it was a way to kind of marry and bridge the gap between traditional gin drinkers and or bourbon drinkers.
So this is a gateway gin then for
it
for
really is
drinkers.
though, because a lot of people are like, oh, it tastes like a Christmas tree. This is not your typical Christmas tree gin.
Right.
Which
yeah, so one of those gateway drugs that you might find.
Yeah.
There you go.
I don't know. Hey, we went to medical marijuana here in Kentucky, so it ain't too far away.
Now we have medical gin.
That's right.
Here we go.
Great. This is awesome.
We aren't too far away, I don't think.
Do you all grow the botanicals on site, or are you harvesting that locally?
So these aren't harvested locally. Most of it comes from various parts of the United States. What I would tell you is that you can expect to see kind of expressions coming out of us. We're going to work with a few mixologists and kind of develop, whether that's some seasonal gins or something like that. I think you're going to find us do that. Wally Dant, who is our head distiller, and my cousin, she's in charge really of kind of the distillery operations side of it. And so we were talking with Molly Wellman out of Cincinnati the other day, and most of you guys know Molly out of there, and she's one of those great personalities and of types, and so we were introduced by Joni out here in our audience to Molly, and so I think Molly's going to work with us on developing something, and so we're kind of looking forward to those collaborative efforts when you can have a lot of fun with this. This is something that you can test really quickly, whether it's going to work or whether it's not. Right?
Yeah. So
as opposed to this, which is 4 some odd years later. Then, but yeah.
Now you're in good hands with Molly for sure.
Yeah.
So be sure to tune in next year for the new show, The Gin Life, as we explore.
Hey, I'm all about some gin. I'm never going to be a part of the vodka life,
so,
though.
Wally, obviously, people know your name. Can you tell us, though, about your background, where you're from, and just what you're doing prior to getting into the distilling industry?
So prior to doing this stuff, which we started out about 3 some odd, almost 4 years ago now, I was in healthcare. So healthcare in Nashville, ran a couple of companies and successfully sold those companies. However, on the side of doing all of those things, I actually had a wine and spirits store in Tennessee that we owned for about 6 years. And then got out of that business because wine and grocery stores was coming into Tennessee. It kept coming up from a legislative perspective. And we said, hey, we were attached to a Sam's Club, right? So Walmart was going to kick our ass out whenever it happened. And we said, all right, let's be smart business people. Let's sell that, which we did, and then got into the wine and spirits distribution business in Tennessee. So we actually represented suppliers in Tennessee, who happens to be a franchise state. And so our first Kentucky bourbon that we represented was Rabbit Hole. And so Cave and I became fast friends through that partnership. And he looked at me one day, he understood the story of my family. And he goes, well, Wally, you got a story, right? And that's half the battle is having a genuine story, right? And he goes, why don't you do this yourself? And so he kind of planted that seed in the back of my head. And so in 2019, really 2018, we kind of embarked on it and said, okay, let's kind of get into it in a big way. And so that's what we did.
Yeah, that's really cool that you're able to do that. And the Dant name, obviously, people in the bourbon industry, people that are drinkers, they hear that name, they know that name. It's intertwined with bourbon history. And it's kind of, if there is such a thing as bourbon royalty in Kentucky, I think that Dant name would definitely have to be there. It's intertwined with the Beam name as well. Can you talk about that and what that means for you?
Well, we all grew up, as a family, kind of knowing our distilling history, right? We sold out of the primary brand in 1943, so that brand that Log Still is not affiliated with, nor do we own the J.W. Dant brand. So everybody that out there, you understand, we don't own the damn thing, right? And good for the people that do, but we don't, right? And so, having said that, there's a lot of Dants that were distillers other than the original Joseph Washington Dant, and my great-grandfather owned the distillery that we're in today, that ground that we have. One of his great uncles owned the distillery right next to ours, which we now own that piece of property. And so you guys are familiar with Steve and Paul Beam and their brand called Yellowstone, right? So that was founded by Joseph Bernard Dant, right? So again, that was a Dant family that started that. Now, the Beams and the Dants are related through, like, the bowling side. So, like, Steve and I are distant cousins. Steve and Paul and I are distant cousins from one another. But that brand was started on our property. And so, like, this bottle that we have up here, we call it the 5th District Series, and it's sourced, right? So, just so you know, everything that you see that says 5th District Series is sourced product from us, right? This is not. This is our own. But this stuff is, and so when we started a bourbon distillery, you needed to have brown water, right? I just couldn't start out and have just gin to sell because everybody would go, we're in Kentucky, we need to have bourbon, right? And so we went out and sourced this product. It's one season, and it's 100 proof. Can't call it bottle and bond because it moved from one distillery to another. Having said that, we think it's a great expression of a high rye bourbon. And we named it after Cold Spring Distillery, which was, again, Joseph Bernard Dant's distillery. So that spring water, the interesting thing is that spring water still runs today. We actually pump it up to our distillery. We use it as cut water for our barrels. Yeah. And it's a way for us to kind of marry our family history with what we're doing at our old distillery and our old new distillery. And so, it's again a way to us to kind of tie in all aspects of what my family's been known for.
So growing up, because I'm just curious. I grew up in Kentucky, and to me, bourbon was, it's really cool, but I'm in Kentucky, so it's not really that big of a thing. But now that I'm older, I obviously realize the impact that it has, not just on our economy, but around the globe. As a kid, did you realize? Was bourbon a thing for you at that point? Did you realize the magnitude? Or
it was. We didn't. No, the short answer to that is no. You grew up around it, so it wasn't any sort of big deal to you. And quite frankly, the way bourbon has taken off over the last 15 or so years, 15 to 20 years or so, it wasn't that big a deal. There, while my grandfather worked there, and there wasn't a I guess what you call a celebrity aspect to that whole thing, right? Well, while they were well-known distillers, you could still walk out and grab your newspaper and nobody would come by and, hey, give me a signed bottle or something like that. I mean, that just didn't, that just didn't happen.
Yeah, the simpler times.
And so while we were all grew up around it, I mean, my mom used it as when we were teething to rub it on your gums, and quite frankly, I did that with my kids too. It works. And then you take a shot, and then you feel better yourself.
Hey, and you were in healthcare.
That's right. So those are the,
Parenting advice.
Your kid sleeps well, you sleep well. It all kind of really works for you. But it wasn't that big a deal for us, I guess.
I understand. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. But that's something. So you had this business. You're in Tennessee, right? Mm-hmm. And so you sell this business, and then was there a moment that, was it a conversation with Cave that you said, "Oh, yeah, I should do this," or was this was it a culmination of, I've sold this business, I really want to, something that you've been thinking about for a long time?
So we all, as members of that family, we all talked about, well, why in the hell did we ever get out of the business? My grandfather was the last one. He retired in 1974 from Shenley, who owned the brand at the time. And so we all looked at ourselves, right, as we grew up, go through family reunions, we all get together, big Catholic family, so you've got 200 cousins that get together on these family reunions, right? And you're all sitting there kibitzing about, what's going on, and either you're playing cards or arguing about politics, one of the two, and then drinking bourbon, and then everybody goes, well, why in the fuck did we, why did we ever sell, why did we ever do anything like that? And so, we all grew up around it, but collectively we said, and not one of that fifth generation was involved in the business, right? And so like my dad was the oldest of that generation on our side, and none of them, from him on down, kind of worked through that industry. And so we all talked about it, but didn't do anything about it. And so, out of my career itself, I started out working at Brown-Forman. And so when I got out of college at U of L, I got my MBA there. And so we're in Lexington, I know, a bunch of you guys. Yeah, you beat us in basketball.
Go Cats.
Yeah, go Cats. There you go. I guess they won today too. But when I got out of college, worked at Brown-Forman, and that just kind of gave me the flavor. I did some little brand management for them back in the mid-'80s. And then from there, I ended up getting into healthcare eventually. But, it kind of gave hey, we're back. We've done some, we're back in the supplier end of things at Brown-Forman. And, that kind of stuck with me. But this is a capital-intensive business. So if anybody doesn't know, it's a capital-intensive business. You're waiting around 4 years for one of these bad boys to get somewhere to get the market, right? And if you're building a distillery, it's just capital-intensive, and so you need cash to be able to do that. And fortunately, the healthcare business has been good to me. And so as we were in that distributing business down in Tennessee, which we serviced all parts of the state down there. It really just began speaking to me, the Cave stuff, and said, hey, maybe this is the right time for our family to enter back into the business again. So I got together with Charles and Lynn. We bought back the old property there in Gethsemane, which is DSP number 47, which you see on all of our bottles. The government gave us back our old DSP.
That's great.
And so it was just one of those culminating moments that said, hey, it's time for us to while there were brands out there, if you talk to the new consumers, most of them don't know it, right? Unless you're a bourbon aficionado and have been around that bourbon business again. If I go out to even parts of Ohio or Indiana, or you talk to anybody that's younger than me, which is most people these days, unfortunately. I don't feel that way, but I am that way. Most of them don't know that that name, right? That Dant name. And while, again, we don't own or are we affiliated with that J.W. Dant distilled spirits brand, I will say that repeatedly throughout the show, just so anybody walks in new, they know that I'm not. But for us, it was really trying to bring back our name into that and really build back the community that gave back to our family for almost 200 years. And anybody that's seen rural America, it's hard to find good paying jobs out there. Mm-hmm. And so Southern Nelson County was an area that didn't have a distillery, hadn't had it since 1962 when the old plant closed. 200 jobs at that point in time, and that size community left. And when those things happen on a repeated basis, whether it's in our community or others, it has devastating effects. Sure. And so there's kids that can't find work there. And so guess what? Where are they going to go? They're going to go into a large city or a large metro area to find work. And so we thought, hey, if we can bring back that community, invest in what we're doing down there, bring back great paying jobs, bring back tourism, right? And, from a tourist perspective, when you can bring those dollars back in, hopefully what you do is begin to set up, success for other businesses to come in and be a part of that as well.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's great. So we're at the end of round one. So I tell you what, Stacey, final thoughts on this barrel-aged gin.
Well, I will say I have had some barrel-aged gins from other distributors, and I'm not going to drop their names here, but this is a solid product. I think that it is good for people like myself who do like gin, but I think it's also a great introductory level gin. It's not too juniper forward, which I think turns a lot of people off from gin. So I think you guys have done a great job with this product.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah, and this is one, because I enjoy gin, but it's not something I drink on a regular basis, but this is a gin that I would just drink neat. Mm-hmm. It's approachable.
Yeah, I'm ready to ask for more, honestly.
All right. Really good. There we go.
I was trying to just work this slowly.
I was trying to work it slowly too, but it's gone.
Like 8 minutes ago, my glass was already empty. So
I've got a full bottle here, so you guys get at it.
So we're good. Well, yeah, I tell you what, let's take a quick break, get a word from our sponsors. We'll be back with more with Wally Dant with Log Still. I was going to say Log Cabin. I don't know why. I'm sorry. Log Still Distillery in just a minute.
Three Chords line of whiskeys embody the spirit of creativity. The whiskey is a true collaboration between producer and composer Neil Giraldo and master blender distiller Ari Sussman. The Three Chord team of expert blenders, coopers, and sensory professionals have developed a multi-step process they called Perfectly Tuned Taste. This process begins by carefully selecting the finest bourbon and rye whiskeys from Kentucky, Tennessee, and Indiana, and then blending them together. Find out more about the whiskeys and distribution in your area at www.threechordbourbon.com.
From our good friends at The Stave comes Lexington's newest hot spot to meet up with friends, have fun, and eat some great food. District 7 Social is a social and beer hall, but it's a lot more than that. Located in Lexington's Distillery District, it's the home of Lexington's first duck pin bowling lanes, and it also features a self-serve beer wall. That's right, self-serve. And if you want more, they've got it. You can try one of their delicious cocktails from the bar or order some great German fusion food from their on-site eatery, Germanish. So what are you waiting for? Be seen, be social. District 7 Social.
All right, everybody, welcome back for round 2 of the Bourbon Life Podcast. I'm your host, Mark, coming to you live today from BourbonCon here in Lexington, a great event that's just put on by the Marriott Griffin Gate here in Lexington. First year they've done it. We just talked about it earlier, but this has been such a fun weekend. And I'm here today, not with my normal co-host, Matt, but with my good friend, Stacey. Stacey, how you doing down at the end of the podcast?
You know what? I'm doing great. That gin was fantastic. Now we're getting ready to get into some bourbon, so I'm excited.
Yeah, well, tell everybody who we have with us.
We have Wally Dant, the president and distiller from Log Still Distillery, not Log Cabin, Mark. Log Still Distillery out of Gethsemane, Kentucky.
There we go.
Wally, welcome back. Thanks for sticking around. We're happy.
Yeah, thanks for not running off the stage.
Well, I was going to bring some log cabin syrup in here for you next, Mark. But
I was going to ask if that was going to be part of the product lineup.
There we go.
So, Wally, can you tell everybody what we have poured up on this second round?
So on this second round, we have our small batch bourbon, which is a wheated mash bill, and it is a little over 4 years of age, 94 proof. So it's going to be hopefully a smooth little sipper for you. A little creaminess. I get a little nuttiness when I taste it.
I'm just getting the nose.
The nose is really nice.
It really is. And you said it's just right at 4 years?
Yeah. Right at 4 years. And so, we use 18-month-old staves in that bourbon barrel. So it's a little, so that age of stave, what happens, once you cut wood, it begins to decay, and so it begins to form those sugars. Well, you keep it out in that yard for that 18-month time frame, then it really begins to produce sugars on a lot quicker basis than a new stave that's generally used. And so we think, using those staves actually, does some great things to our bourbon.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, that's the first thing that really stood out was the sweetness. And we have like audience participation because we do have.
We did give some samples out.
That's right. Some samples out here. So, Stacey, what are you picking up in terms of the nose on this?
This is like dessert in a glass on the nose. I don't know if you guys are able to smell that in your little cups there, but dessert on the nose. Getting a lot of like creme brulee, like real creamy.
Yeah, very creamy smelling.
This is great.
Yeah,
this is really
sugary,
nice.
Like a burnt sugar almost type of aroma to it. The sweetness. I get almost like a little bit of a cherry off of this.
Yeah, I was going to say there's a hint of some like dark fruit.
So what about you, our audience out there? Do you guys picking up those notes? Is there anything that stands out to you guys that we've not hit on? Wally, what do we miss? Anything else when you think about the nose on this one?
Yeah, I mean, you get a little bit of that. I don't know. I get a little cinnamon on the nose, right? I can smell some of that in there.
I'm getting hungry.
Yeah.
There you go.
Did you bring snacks?
Man, Wally, did you bring snacks for the bottles?
I did not. No.
So let's talk about the name, the Log Still. That has a story to it. So can you share that story with our listeners and how you decided to come to that name?
So again, the main guy that began distilling for our family that became famous for it started out in what they call stilling on a log, right? So he actually used a hollowed out poplar log, cut it in half lengthwise, hollowed it out, banded it back together, and ran copper tubes up through that log, right? He could not afford to have a copper still, which all copper stills at that point in time came out of Pittsburgh. And so he began distilling in a hollowed out log distilling on the log. And so him and the Wathen family were known families for distilling on hollowed out logs. And you've heard the Wathen brand. There's still that Wathen brand that's out there today. But they and the Dant family were known for distilling on the hollowed out log. And so when we went to choose a name that kind of represented us, that kind of stuck out in my mind. And so with Log Still Distillery, and so we just thought it'd again speak to us and who we are.
So I'm just curious, was that something, because I don't know much about the history, I know something about the history of distilling, but not in terms of using logs for distilling. Was that something that was prevalent at that point in time back in the frontier day?
Yeah, and I think there were a number of families that did that. In fact, I forget who I was talking to just this past week that actually visited the distillery, and we're talking about I think it was even Molly Wellman, as a matter of fact. That's who I want to say it was when she visited with us, and she was doing some history in Ohio on distilling, and she had ran across another family who talked about stilling on the log. And so it was a cheap way, right, to actually make bourbon. Let's all face the facts, it was moonshine, to make moonshine. And really it was. You're talking 1830s, and none of us knew how to burn it. If any of you guys got a story on who discovered a charred, oak barrel would make great bourbon, while there's stories about who did it first, it was really moonshine, just running consistent moonshine, and so with the development of that consistent moonshine, they eventually said, okay, well, let's put it in a bourbon barrel. And those bourbon barrels were the means of transportation, whether it was on boats down the Ohio River or Pottinger Creek or whatever we got around us. It was that or rail. And so that's how your goods were, transported in those things. So,
I'm just curious, back on the distilling, was that something that was just done mostly like per family, or just for friends, family, local, close people?
I think originally it was just for friends and family, right? All locals, and just like all good moonshiners, everybody discovers who the damn good moonshiners were, right? And then they want more of it, and so as a part of that, everybody began to demand, from him or from the Wathen family, for instance, that, hey, we'd like more of that product. And so eventually he was able to afford a copper still out of Pittsburgh, which really then set him up for, for him and his family to have a distillery ultimately. And then from there kind of, do pretty darn well with it.
Yeah. Now, somebody told me, I think that maybe some modern day moonshiners were even interested in the Log Still Distilling.
Yeah. Moonshiners actually, the show Moonshiners actually had, they came and wanted to understand kind of how a log still might be done, and so we talked with them a little bit about that. They've actually tried to recreate that on the show, a log still on the show, but we did tell them repeatedly that we don't own the J.W. Dant brand, or not affiliated with that throughout that process.
Right.
Actually, they credit them. They did run the disclaimer at the end of the show when most people, watch the credits at the end of the show, and they see that sort of thing. But
you need a T-shirt made.
We did
not that Dant.
He comes with his own stickers.
We did want to sell those disclaimers. Actually, I think we're going to put them on T-shirts or on bumper stickers and start displacing them and putting them on our car. So, yeah.
So it sounds like it was a more cost-effective way to do bourbon, but that sounds pretty labor-intensive, honestly. But I don't know much about that at all. But
again, every one of those bourbon guys had to do much of their own stuff, right? And so whether it was growing the corn, milling the corn, getting other grains in, because nobody did rye. Nobody did rye in the 1830s. Let's just all face the facts, right? So there was only one way to get rye in, right? And that was probably through rail. And so when rail came in, then they began to have flavoring grains and all of that good stuff that we now know as modern day bourbon. But all of that was done because they were using what they had on hand. And so many of them coopered their own barrels. They had a cooperage there. There was a Dant cooperage in Dant, Kentucky. And so, all of that they did themselves because out of necessity, not out of want for somebody else doing the stuff, but it was really out of necessity.
Yeah. So let's talk about the name, Monk's Road.
Uh-huh.
Can you talk about the history of that and what that means for the brand?
Yeah. So Monk's Road, the reason we chose Monk's Road is there's a road that comes to our place that's called Monk's Road. It's as simple as that. No.
Okay, next
question.
There
we go. Next question.
Thanks, Wally.
I needed to keep this till 6 o'clock, so that's the short and dirty answer. No, there's an abbey out there, the Abbey of Gethsemane, and the road that's in front of the abbey is called Monk's Road. Our family, the Dant family, donated the original land that the abbey sits on, right? So when I was choosing a brand name, I was looking at a map, kind of where we were, and just for whatever reason, just looking at the map and saw Monk's Road just kind of stuck out to me, and I said, well, we've got history there, right? We donated the original land actually to build a girls' school back in the 1820s. We actually donated to the Sisters of Loretta, and they built a girls' school. And eventually they turned that school over to the Trappist monks back in the 1848 or so. And so when they did that, and I'm looking at, kind of brand names and what I thought might work and why not, you could have fun with Monk's Road in a number of different ways. But we said, hey, that would be a great brand for this state, for kind of representing our family in that sense of place, and so that's why we chose that name.
So I'm just curious, when you made that decision, you said, look, I'm going to go back to Gethsemane, take this old distillery that's there, and rebuild this and just...
Yep, we're good.
We're here.
All right, yep, all right.
Make that end.
Uh-oh, somebody else.
They cut you off.
I guess they didn't like my question.
There we go. There we go. Yeah.
Sorry about that.
How do we
guys.
do that in the Bourbon Life basement?
So I'm just curious, what did people think? I mean, because it seemed like it would have to have been a daunting task. So what was the consensus of family members? Were they supportive, and friends, family? What did they think when you said, I'm going to do this?
Sure, Dad, go ahead, right? When we started, right, we didn't envision it as big as it is today. And as you get into this business, you quickly understand that scale matters, right? I mean, not to say that any craft distiller can't, but scale matters. In order to be seen and be seen by you all, you got to work in a 3-tier system, right? So you've got the distributors that need to understand that you're serious about your brands, that you're going to be around for a while, that you're going to put money from a marketing perspective into this, because they're representing 30 other different brands, not all bourbons, for instance, potentially, but other things. And so their time and energy is split between, a portfolio of brands. And so you've got to make yourself stand out in that. And so as a part of that, and when you have people that come out to visit you, you want them to come back and spend money. And the distilling industry today, as we know it, most of them, right? You come out, you taste, you put your finger into a fermenting tank, maybe, right? Taste it, and then you buy a bottle and you leave. Well, you could do the same thing at my place, and then you do it maybe twice, and then you go, I've already been there. I'm not gonna, maybe I don't want to come back again, or I'm gonna come back, maybe 2 years from now, see what else they're doing. Maybe there's another SKU that they've got on the shelf. And so we said, hey, how can we be different? How can we create a great memory for somebody to come back and go, hey, I had a great time out there. And it wasn't necessarily about the bourbon, right? We always want you to think about our bourbon, but maybe they had a great time, fishing in our 12-acre lake, or taking the train out to where we were, or, seeing a great show at our 2,000-seat amphitheater, and taking their wife and staying in the bed and breakfast. And she goes, hey, I'd like to go back there again. I don't need to go taste bourbon with you, right? But, I can sit out on the porch and overlook the lake and have a great time. And so we tried to look at our campus from that perspective and say, how can we be more inclusive, right, to include the family aspect to it, and for people to create a great memory. We've got an event and conference center out there, 21,000 square feet, that looks like a rick house. And for people to kind of create their own legacy, whether they get married out there and create a great time, they come back years later and go, hey, I want to go back to the place, that began my family. And so those are the things that we've tried to do to help create, a sense of a destination more than just spirits that are sitting on the table, sitting in front of you.
I think that's something that's really interesting and really important, because you have so many places that you just go there, you taste the whiskey, and you leave. And that was something that really drew me to you all. I still haven't made it out to Gethsemane yet to see you, but your presence online has been well received. I mean, I've heard nothing but great things about the amphitheater and the concerts and everything that you guys have had out there. So I think that's really something to be proud of, for sure.
I mean, it seems like it's like you said, it's a destination. It's not just a place you stop and visit for an hour and then come back maybe 6 months or a year later. It's an experience, and you want your guests to be engaged and have things that they can actually do and have more fun than just sampling a bourbon.
Well, when you're in the middle of East something Egypt. You go, how do I get people to come, right? And while you always like to say, hey, so they only come because of this, you smack you in reality, right? You got to say, okay, well, I'm gonna go to Bardstown, Kentucky, and outside of Kentucky, most people go, well, where's Bardstown, right? And people generally know Louisville, Lexington, but they don't know the bourbon capital of the world, which is what we call ourselves in Bardstown. And so how do you draw people there? Well, you've got to do other things, and it's the interesting thing for me, right, is as we get to be more well known and people understand Monk's Road and all that. When we go out to tastings, and you talk to them, they go, have you ever heard of us? They go, no, well, I don't think so. And then all of a sudden you talk about the amphitheater, and they go, oh, you're the place, right? And so when you can begin to make those connections, right, people go, okay, I know who you are and kind of what you're doing. That's the fun. I think that's the fun thing.
You sold me on fishing, though. I'm there.
All right. Well, there you
I'm
go.
there.
We do have a stock lake.
Let's have a Bourbon Life fishing tour.
I think it sounds
there you
great.
go.
Hey, let's talk about the palate and the finish on this one. How about that?
I hope it's not like tuna. So let's make sure that
sardines. Wait,
sardines. Yeah, there you go.
Definitely no sardines on the nose
What do
on this.
you get on the palate?
I will say that after this is sat a little bit, I'm getting a little bit more baking spice on the nose now, which Wally, you were mentioning that initially, but I'm getting a lot more of that now as it's opened up a little bit.
Yep.
But I think this is I don't like to use the word smooth, but this is a very soft, approachable bourbon. I really enjoy it. Neat. I think that even people that don't enjoy bourbons neat would like this neat.
And this was a 94 proofer.
Right.
94 proof. Yep.
Yeah.
This is a great bourbon.
So it's very approachable again. I like that gin, the barrel-aged gin. Very approachable, very easy to drink. It's got those classic bourbon flavors to it. You've got that nice sweetness, that combination of baking spices like you talked about, but also I get the cinnamon on the palate, which I really enjoy.
Yeah, the cinnamon on the palate's coming through, and I'm getting cherry as well on the palate.
Yeah, so you get that sweetness. I love it when you get a sweetness and a cinnamon together because it reminds me of those little Brock's, when I was a kid, we used to eat those little red hot candies. Yeah, so that's what it kind of reminds me of. And it's a wheated bourbon too, right? So,
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, so very nice. Great job on that. So
Yeah, thank you.
All right, let's take a quick break, get a word from our sponsors, and we'll be back with more with Wally Dant with Log Still Distillery in just a minute.
The Stave Restaurant is a bourbon lover's paradise right here in the heart of bourbon country. Located at 5711 McCracken Pike in Millville, Kentucky, between Castle and Key and Woodford Reserve, Chef Kyle Klatka prepares amazing food each day that features an elevated Kentucky-inspired cuisine. With a full-service bar, great bourbon flights, and signature cocktails, the Stave is the perfect place to catch up with friends after a fun-filled day of touring the local distilleries. Be sure to check them out online at thestavekentucky.com or at Instagram and Facebook at The Stave Kentucky.
All right, everybody, welcome back for the third and final round of the Bourbon Life Podcast, coming to you live today from BourbonCon out here at the Lexington Marriott Griffin Gate. We are so excited to be here. Thank you all to our live audience for joining us and sticking around with us. Thank you, Wally, for staying with us as well. and I'm here tonight with Stacey. Matt is out. So I have Stacey with us here, filling in.
I'm still here. I'm still here.
There we go.
Thank you for that's right. It's going to be the Stacey and Matt show. We don't need Mark anymore.
Yeah,
right?
sorry, Mark,
yeah,
you're
thanks.
out.
I appreciate it. Yeah,
You can take a vacation now.
I appreciate that. After 155 episodes, it's about
There you go.
time to do that. So Stacey, tell everybody who we have with us tonight.
Well, I think that this guy's name is Wally Dant. I'm pretty sure that's who it is. But
Last time I checked,
if you guys missed round 1 and round 2, he is from Log Still Distillery,
That's right.
Yep.
That's right.
a.k.a. the Monk Road products, if
There
you
we
guys
go.
haven't made that correlation yet.
That's right. Well, you want to tell everybody what we have poured up for this third and final round, please?
So for the third and final round, we have our high rye bourbon. So it's 6 years old with these barrels. And these are single barrels, so 100 proof. And every one of these, and it's called 5th District Series, which for those of you that don't know what the 5th District is, it was the taxing district, right, in central Kentucky. So government used to have little offices in every single distillery where they made sure that we paid our taxes, right? And so we thought for all of our source bourbon, so this is a source bourbon, that we'd have everything under that 5th District Series and call out old distilleries that were a part of that 5th district. So this one is Cold Spring Distillery, which again was started by J.B. Dant, and so it was our way to pay homage to him, and it's on our property. That old distillery is on our property, and so it was a way to kind of pay homage to him, and so that's what you have: single barrel, 100 proof.
Yeah,
and I think it's a great expression of a high rye. We can't call it bottled and bond because it moved from one distillery to another, but it's single season, same place in that rick house. So we think it's a great expression of high rye bourbon that mash bill we'll continue to produce as we turn to our own products on our own distillery.
So sourcing these barrels, you're taking them on site. Are you continuing to age them on site as well, or when they come to you guys, are you go ahead and blending and bottling then?
So we don't. For this one, it's all single barrel, so we haven't blended any of that, right? But we do have more barrels of it left. So actually, this series, this Cold Spring, we've actually stopped bottling, and we'll come out with a Series 2 in June. It'll be slightly different. So we're actually going through the experimentation stage right now, blending and seeing what that next series is going to come out to be.
Very nice. Stacey, throwing it to you.
You beat me to it. I was going to be like, Mark, what do you get on the nose?
No.
Well,
that's not the way this show works.
Spoiler alert. Spoiler alert. During the break, Wally said that this is his little brown sugar bomb, and that definitely speaks volumes across the nose there.
Yeah, it's funny because earlier I talked about the wheated bourbon that kind of had that cinnamon disc flavor to it. This reminds me of my childhood in another way. I used to buy those Topps baseball cards in those packs that you buy. You open it up and it had that pink gum that had that white whatever stuff on it, and that bubble gum smell. I don't know if you guys remember that, but I get, and it's a high rye, and that happens sometimes for me if I'm drinking a rye whiskey or a high rye bourbon. A lot of times I will get the only way I can describe it is to say it's like a bubblegum flavor. But if you're familiar with those old pink, they used to crumble in your hands, like, and you try to get it all in your mouth. You'd lick the cards to get the gum. But that's kind of what it reminds me.
What a card collector
yes,
you
it
were.
does. Yeah, I think every one of us had that memory.
Yeah. Okay.
At least I do.
I didn't lick my cards, though. No.
Oh, yeah. So, Wally, what's one thing I wanted to go back and ask you again, because you'd mentioned Cave and the conversation with him. I mean, obviously, you were as a distributor in Tennessee, so you had connections, you had resources, people you talked to. Have you found that as you decided to get into the industry and you work towards that, I mean, Cave obviously was a friend of yours, have other people in the industry been supportive like that? What's been your general take on that as well?
I think, outside of, a few folks that don't like my name. Most of the industry has been embracive of us, right? No. Look, everybody should be concerned about their trademarks. Let me first say that, right? And while I love those guys to death and their products, right? I think really the industry as a whole is pretty unique. I've been in a number of industries myself, and everybody is really more secretive than what I think the bourbon industry is. So when we began our process around building or even talking about mash bills and yeast strains and things like that, they've all been very open with us about what it is that they found successful for themselves and what they thought we could be successful at. And so whether it was Pat and Shane with Firm Solutions or Wilderness Trail, those guys were great to talk to and understand kind of what they were doing. And then you talk to the guys, Freddie No, Fred and Freddie No. I mean, there's really good, genuinely good people. And, Connor Driscoll, right? And Connor, he's a great guy.
Yeah.
And or Steve Nally over at Bardstown Bourbon Company. Right. Every one of them, Bill Samuels Jr., right? And they've all been really great with us in talking about processing and, things to watch out for. And so this industry is unlike really any of the other ones that I've been a part of, and it's a great, whether you call it a brotherhood or sisterhood, because I've got a cousin now, and there's a number of great women distillers out there. You look at them, and every one of them, have been really gracious with their time and their intellect, and that's the cool thing about this industry, I think, in general. While we all may argue about what goes on a shelf and how it goes on a shelf and what the pricing is and competing against one another, on the operations end of it, it's really completely different.
Yeah, and that's what, it's funny because we've had distillers on the show like Fred know that, talking about the relationships, the friendships that you have that are at that level. And he's like, we let the marketing people and the retail people can fight amongst themselves for the shelf space and for everything. But it seems like there is a genuine camaraderie there. And, the guests that we've had on the show that come on, such as yourself, I mean, just a genuineness to that. And I don't think you see that in a lot of other industries. And it just seems so unique to me, what the bourbon industry has to offer.
Well, and from a consumer standpoint, that's something nice to hear and to see as well. Like, you don't want everybody out there fighting for everybody's attention.
No, you don't. I mean, and even on the marketing end of things, while we all, cajole one another and all of that around, kind of what's in the bottle and how it's made and, whose is better. This thing ain't ending anytime soon, right? And so there is, that demand is out there. You see all of these big distilleries that are investing in, new equipment, new capacity, and we haven't met the demand in the United States, let alone, when you look at overseas. And, there's just a tremendous opportunity, and to take over from Scotch overseas, and I know a lot of you folks may like Scotch.
I take it you're not a Scotch fan?
Show of hands, how many people like Scotch?
See a few of you, right? And so, the single malt category in the United States, they're all trying to define that right now, right? And so, but when you think about that, and you think about the opportunity that's out there for us, for a product that, hits on all notes, like all those tasting notes, and provides that corn sweetness that nobody else can do, that's, I think that'll be something that'll hopefully, set us up for success overseas.
Yeah, and that's something I didn't have that on my list of questions, but it's always fun to hear people talking about that, because other distillers, when we ask them about what the future looks like, and they're talking about the expansion, it's like every week you see something in the news, like Buffalo Trace just saw, I think last week, they basically doubled their production capacity. Right. I mean, it's not just one distillery. I mean, it's every distillery.
It's constant.
Is putting hundreds of millions of dollars, potentially into their facilities. So you kind of subscribe to that same idea that we're in for a long ride here.
If not, we're all going down in a lot of big flames. I can tell you that much. There's going to be a lot of insurance claims out there. I'm just saying.
And then everybody's going to have to drink Scotch because you guys all quit.
They say there's like 11 million barrels in a roof in Kentucky now, and there's only 4 million Kentuckians. So I'm going to go claim my 2.5 barrels from somebody. And
there you go.
Just come on. Yeah,
just bring them home.
Right. Bring
now,
them home.
You mentioned earlier you do this. You actually have family involved with you with the distillery. Can you talk about that and the importance to you of having those family members work with you?
Don't do it. No.
I was going to say hats off to you. I don't think I could work with mine.
Well, if I had to do this all over again, no. No. So Lynn and Charles.
We need a disclaimer for
that's
that.
Exactly.
Too.
That's right.
Cut that.
So no, Lynn and Charles are really great to work with. Lynn is the smarter one of all of us. She quite frankly, she's a chemical engineer, and she's a Wharton MBA, and so really she can run circles around all of us. But she really focuses in on the distilling end of things for us there at the distillery. She lends an ear for us on the marketing end of things. So she's just a great collaborator for us, and by her own right, when you can say she's the first Dant woman that is a distiller, that's a pretty cool thing for us to have her in that role, and she's she's just smarter than the rest of us. And then Charles was born and raised in New Hope in Gethsemane. He actually saved a part of that water tower that we have on campus. He's credited with saving that from being taken down and salvaged. And his grandfather worked there at the distillery, worked there through the early 70s, and Charles helps us on all of the operations side for our business. And so we do a great job playing off of one another, our strengths and our weaknesses, and we're passionate about what we're doing. And when you can marry all those things, we make a pretty formidable team that that I think all the rest of everybody else looks at and says, hey, they're doing it over here. Maybe I can do it on my end.
Yeah, I mean that's great. And if you can get along with family well enough to work with them.
So aside from working with family, what's been your favorite part of this whole journey for you?
It's really getting to know folks like these guys that are sitting out in our audience. It's
well, except for maybe those guys.
Except for the loud guys that are on the left of me. No, but it is really the relationships that we start developing, right? And when you can look at Joni up here in the front, who says, "Hey, I want to introduce you to folks in Northern Kentucky that you haven't met before," and she has no skin in the game other than being a great friend to us. It's when you make those kind of relationships, those are the things that I think that matter. That we look to and say, we're successful because folks are helping us get successful. Like these shows. Whether it's Bourbon Life or Bourbon Pursuit, and you can sit down and have a great talk about, the industry in general and our brands and how much that a passion that we have, that's meaningful, and you make great friends. And at the end of it all, right? I'm not taking this with me. I'm being put 6 foot under, and hopefully somebody upstairs takes me up. But what you're trying to leave behind is a great impression for somebody to go, hey, he did the right thing for his community. Look what he left behind, and that's knock on wood. That's really where you kind of want to be.
Yeah.
Well said. Yeah.
Thanks.
Standing ovation from the crowd.
Yeah, great answer on that one, Stacey. Let's jump back to the whiskey real quick and talk about that before.
Sorry.
Sorry, I went to death pretty quickly, but sorry.
So we're coming back to life now. Coming back to the Bourbon Life.
Yeah. Oh, that's
Hey.
right. Bourbon Life.
What do you think, Stacey?
I think that this is my favorite so far. Not to say that I haven't enjoyed all of these pours, but the nose on this is phenomenal, and anybody else that enjoyed this can also agree with me on that. But palate is great. I'm a sucker for high rise. I'm a rye chick through and through. But this is a phenomenal product.
Yeah, I like the sweetness. There's that sweetness that still comes through on the palate. Talking about that kind of a bubblegum thing, but that spice on that rye, that high rye.
Well balanced.
Oh, yeah. It just comes right in after that sweetness and chases it away. So you get that nice mouthfeel. You get that nice spiciness on it as well. What audience, do you guys agree with that with that assessment?
Wally? Head nods, yeah. I like it because the spice on it is not too much like cinnamon hot candy, and that's something that I'm not a huge fan of in my whiskeys, but this I think is a good balance of spice, and it hits like mid palate and just kind of lingers there. So you guys nailed it with this one.
Yeah, thank you.
Very nice.
Thank you.
So Wally, what does the future look like for Wally and also for Log Still?
You can expect to see more bourbon brands out there. Actually, so this is sourced, right? So again, what you taste was sourced. Our products aren't going to differentiate a whole lot from what our high rye bourbon won't differentiate a whole lot. I think some of the subtle differences that you're going to find, we're actually using that lake, that 12-acre lake, to make our distillate out there in the distillery. Right, so there's 6 springs that feed that lake. We did not, so we wanted to replicate kind of what was done at the old distillery. So we kind of know mash bills, we know yeast strain, we have the water source. You can pretty much make what was made out there,
I was
right?
gonna say the possibilities are endless for you guys.
Right, and so we don't use an RO process. And I'm getting really scientific and technical with you, but we don't use RO on our distillate water from that lake, right? So we want that minerality to come through from that limestone, those limestone springs that feed our 12-acre lake. And so if anybody's here from Kentucky this past early summer and late fall, we were kind of in a little bit of a drought, right? But our lake, that 12-acre lake, was only down about 6 inches. We use about 36,000 gallons a day to make our bourbons. And to be down only 6 inches means that our aquifer, that spring, was really supplying our lake with a lot of water. And so, we've tasted our distillate, we've tasted it in barrel as it ages now. It's been in barrel now for 6 months. And the notes that we're actually getting off of that are for that young, are actually pretty fantastic. And so, we think, ultimately that when we compare our old distillery juice against the new distillery juice, and we've got it, right? We can do that. Hopefully it's going to compare favorably to what was done at the old plant. And when we can recreate those things, that makes us different, right? Those are the things that make us different. In 2024, you're going to see our high rye bourbon come out. You're also going to see our rye whiskey, Kentucky rye, come out. So it won't be a 95.5, but it'll be a Kentucky rye, so a little more corn in that, and to kind of balance out that rye spice. But, you're going to see those come out in 2024, and then you'll begin seeing some of our own make, of our own grandparents' mash bills come out in kind of some specialty bourbons that I think will be pretty outstanding.
Very nice. If you ever need taste testers,
please
just
let us know.
The Bourbon Life is there to support you.
Especially the rye.
Love to have you out there. Yeah, for sure.
So where can our listeners find out more information about Log Still and your products?
You can find us at logstilldistillery.com. That's one place to find us, is on the website. You can find us on Instagram, Facebook. I don't think we have a TikTok account yet.
I was just getting ready
and
to
if we
ask.
do, you will not see me doing silly TikTok things.
You won't see
out
us
there.
on
There's some
Tik- well,
things I will do, and
you're
there's
on
some things I
TikTok.
won't do.
Yeah.
But if I drink a lot, then you may see me on TikTok.
And karaoke, maybe, right?
And I will karaoke. What was it?
Rock
What am I?
Lobster.
Rock Lobster. That's right. And so if I do Rock Lobster, I will be drunk, and you just know that I will be drunk.
Oh, that's awesome. So, Wally, any final thoughts before we wrap it up today?
Again, thank you guys to Bourbon Life for having us on the show. BourbonCon was great. This is our first year here, so I think they did a beautiful job.
Yeah, absolutely.
For really not a whole lot of planning time, and so looking forward to seeing this next year and seeing it grow, and again being a part of what you guys or what they have going on out here.
Yeah, well, thank you. Appreciate that. Stacey, any final thoughts before we close it out?
I just want to say everything that we tried today was great. Don't be afraid to try the barrel aged gin for those non-drinkers, non-gin drinkers.
I agree.
For sure.
And Wally, thank you so much for coming out and joining us. We appreciate you sticking around. I know you spoke early this morning already, and then you hung out with us to do the podcast. So we really appreciate that, and very appreciative of what you're doing. The passion, obviously, you can't even describe it in words almost. You can just kind of feel it, how passionate you are about what you're doing here. So hats off to you for what you are doing, especially not just for your family, but for your community. I mean, that speaks volumes about the type of person that you are. So I appreciate that, and I'm sure all of our audience appreciates that as well. You can see it on their expressions as well. So thank you for that.
Well, thank you, Mark.
And thank you all, our live audience, for joining us. And we do want to thank all of our sponsors. Of course, we are the Bourbon Life Podcast, and we appreciate everything that our sponsors do for us. We appreciate all of our listeners. We appreciate our live audience tonight. And with that said, I'm going to wrap it up so we can go to dinner with our tagline, which is, may your glasses always be full, and may you keep on living the Bourbon Life.
Thank you for joining us for this week's episode of the Bourbon Life Podcast. Our mission at the Bourbon Life is simple: to share our passion for all things bourbon with you every week. And we'd really love to hear your thoughts on how we're doing. You can find us on Instagram and Facebook at The Bourbon Life. You can also contact us by email at thebourbonlife@gmail.com. And you can always find us on your favorite podcast platform. If you have a moment, we'd love it if you would rate us and give us a review. So until next week, we hope your glass is always full and that you keep on living the Bourbon Life.